I forget what you said that your job was. You're a go-between.
I was what's called an asset.
Right. Okay.
I was an intelligence asset. I was supervised by handlers for the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency. I was not covert. I was covert from your end. Like you guys, the American people had no idea that President Clinton had opened up a back channel because they didn't want you all to know this. But in fact, from the very first meetings that I have at the Iraqi embassy and the Libyan embassy, they were told who I was. They knew that I was a passionate anti-sanctions activist and passionately anti-war. I hated the first Gulf War, had protested the Gulf War, and I wanted to do anything that I could to try to create a communications. They couldn't have a formal communications because of the sanctions. They were officially on the pariah list, and yet they had to have some kind of communications and discussion in order to on terrorism specifically.
So my question is, you were a back channel between everybody. I find it odd that your boss doesn't talk to the people in the administration.
Oh, they did.
They sent you over there to yell at people.
Well,
tell them.
I think that he did. I know that he did. I know that he did. Well, what he did was, I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe that he contributed to the White House memo on the presidential directive instruction request. There's a formal term for that. I'm afraid I don't know I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. He did contribute to that, and he had vastly more information than I did. I was getting all my knowledge from him. But the fact that we needed fast turnaround on this because we thought the attack was within a couple of weeks. In fact, the attack didn't occur for this was August 6th, and it occurred over a month later. But we thought that the attack could come as early as, the 3rd or 4th week of August. We thought it was imminent. And so, well, he probably did also. Everybody was doing it. See, this is the thing that, no offense, but there was so much discussion about this attack. Everybody was talking about it. George Tenet had some meetings. Other analysts had meetings at the White House that Condoleezza Rice has conveniently pretended didn't happen. But there was a lot of knowledge, and the fact that I would be able to get the Attorney General's attention and the staff attention by saying I'm in direct contact with Iraq. That's kind of like a bona fide thing that in the CIA. That's they call it bona fide.
More information to them is better.
Yeah, exactly. We were, and it wasn't like a supervisory thing. At that point, they wanted someone with direct contact, because I had direct contact with the events, and I could cite that and say, you need to listen to me, because I spoke with the Iraqis on Saturday, and I need to tell you this. You see what I mean? So I'm sure he also did. I know he did other things. It's really questionable that there was a jihadi plot. I do believe there were hijackers. Now, I have to tell you that I do believe there were hijackers. On the other hand, I know that the people that they did identify were assets. Okay? They worked for the United States government. And they were the men who were identified as the hijackers were not jihadis. They were not devoutly religious men. They went to strip clubs, they drank alcohol, they smoked cigarettes, they chased women. Real deep, authentic jihadis would do none of that. They were, and so it's really curious to me as to what and I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately, but what their final minutes must have been on this earth. What did they think they were doing? I truly do not know. I don't know if they thought it was just a training exercise. I don't know if they thought, I just don't know. But I do not believe they were real jihadis. Well, here's the thing. They did fly into the building. Of course, they did. And they could have been on automatic pilot. That makes sense. We know that there was a heightened GPS and heightened cell phone activity that is very unusual. Usually the GPS only works it doesn't work at certain altitudes. And at a scale of like 1 to 10, the GPS signal was working at a 10. whereas ordinarily it might work at a 4. See? And so something was helping boost, and it had to be boosted. It couldn't have just spontaneously done this on its own. Something had to be boosting the GPS signal. And it's just a matter of scientific requirement that it had to be boosted, and it was. The cell phone was the same thing. Some people have tried to say that the cell phone conversations did not happen. I do believe they did happen. I do believe that people got through to their spouses. But again, you see that it had to be there had to be some technological boost for it to be done. And I think that the hijackers got a lot of help. They got a lot of help. I'd like to answer this on a couple of levels. First of all, the CIA has a long track record of doing false flag operations on itself. And one of the reasons that I may be more trustworthy is that I was an asset, not a CIA director. My CIA handler received $13 million tax-free. Didn't even have to pay $1 in taxes. Is that not the sweetest thing you've ever heard in your life? From the 9/11 investigation of emergency appropriations that were intended for the Iraq to secure Iraq's cooperation. And he took the money, and you've never heard him speak. And when I was under indictment, my own CIA handler refused to speak to my attorneys for 5 years. If he had spoken to my attorneys at any time at all, we could have ended my indictment entirely. But the other thing is that the reason you should trust me is because I paid for this. I was locked up in prison on a military base for a year, and I was held under indictment for 5 years. And the government was so, if you do a little research on my story, you'll find the government was so threatened by what I was going to say that they actually argued this is like a record. There's a history of this. You can confirm this. They wanted to forcibly drug me with Haldol, Ativan, and Prozac, which would have chemically lobotomized me, because they said that they admitted that I was not hallucinating. I do not suffer depression. For those of you who do suffer depression, sorry, but I don't. I don't have mood disturbances. They said I had good eye contact. I was cooperative, smiling. They could not identify anything wrong with me except that I argued that my defense was I had worked in anti-terrorism for 9 years, and I warned about 9/11, and my team warned about 9/11. And they were like, they tried to detain me up to 10 years. They actually petitioned the court for the right, on the Patriot Act, for the right to detain me up to 10 years in prison with no trial and no hearing. Imagine that. The government is arguing that we don't have to give this woman a hearing. We can just lock her up indefinitely. And I was the test case on this, and it was horrible. And they wanted to lock me up and forcibly drug me at the same time, so that I would be so destroyed. They told the judge that they had no idea how long my cure was going to take, but they wanted it.
Why weren't you judged?
The judge in my case was Michael Mukasey. Michael Mukasey later became U.S. Attorney General, and I fought so hard, and my beloved companion, sweet, wonderful Jay Fields, who died of cancer, unfortunately, never lived to see me exonerated. He fought in the blogs, and he fought on alternative radio, because the corporate media refused to cover my story. They didn't want to tell you what was going on. They said that they implied very strongly that I was a religious maniac. And I do believe in God, and I have a spiritual life, yes, I do, but I'm not a religious maniac. I guess a religious maniac would be someone like the Elizabeth Smart rapist, kidnapper, who went into court and was like spouting religious stuff and was standing up and singing hymns in court, stuff like that. They wanted me to. Yeah, it was, and when they realized that there was actually I call it my Amnesty International moment. They had already the Justice Department had already petitioned to forcibly drug me, and I was waiting for a decision. And one morning, I was locked up in prison at this point. I had been held on Carswell Air Force Base for 8 months, and then I was moved to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York for 4 months. And one morning, at 5:30 in the morning, the guard wakes me up, he shakes me, he said, "You're going to court today." And I'm like weeping. I'm thinking that they've got the decision and they're going to like send me back to Carswell to be drugged, and I'm hysterical. I was absolutely hysterical. And I get into the courtroom, and I'm in a holding cage that's about the size of this table. And they come in, my attorney comes in, and he says, "Oh my God, someone has started a blog on your case, and people are writing your judge. They're writing Judge Mukasey. You got to tell your friend to stop doing this." I was like, "Never, no, no way." And I was like, "We are and literally, I grabbed the bars. I was like, "We are never going to stop. We are going to fight to defend this Constitution. You are breaking the law. And we are never going to shut up until this is done." You can tell that crooked prosecutor that he can just go to hell, because we're going to keep talking until, you're never going to shut me up now. This was a mistake. This was a huge mistake that they did this to me. And we went in, and the judge was like, so. And at that point, Jay had published psych records. After my arrest, I had been ordered to have this actually saved me. I had been ordered to attend weekly psychology meetings. I had never had any psychological problems, and I had a year's worth of documentation saying that I suffered no mental illness, no depression, no psychosis, no mania, nothing, no mood disturbances. And these are in the back of my book, so you can actually look at this stuff for yourself, and you can see the papers with your own eyes. And you can read them. The judge was like, "Well, this is extraordinary. You're telling me this woman is incompetent and she's suffering from this grave mental illness, and yet she has all these records which are on the bloody internet. Why are these papers not in my courtroom?" And the judge was like, "This is just not going to happen." And at that point, I was saved, because the judge was like, "This woman is not cooperative." If I had been cooperative, they would have done it. If I had been passive, they would have done it. But I'm a fighter, and they still wouldn't give me a hearing. And I know how to fight. I'm an activist and an asset. Believe me, I know how to fight. And it was like the Patriot Act was so hideous, so big, so powerful, that there was nothing that they were going to let it break through. But Judge Mukasey also did the financial case on the 9/11, the insurance claims for 9/11. For Larry Silverstein, who went to his synagogue. They both attend the same synagogue.
Hold on to the story that they were hijacking.
Well,
and then have the hijackers alive. I don't know this.
Well, but we don't necessarily know who the hijackers were.
We also have other information that some of the serial numbers of the planes were located several years later, as the planes are still in existence. So there's a lot of really
very strange.
Very strange. There's a lot of strange. And then that plane that went down in Pennsylvania with no plane parts.
That was shot down.
No plane parts anywhere.
There was a plane that was shot down, and I know that there was a pilot who shot down one of the airplanes, and he is locked up in prison in Florida right now.
What's his name?
I don't know. I could get it for you. I will get it for you. I've been told his name before, and I'm actually doing a radio interview with Michael Herzog tomorrow, who's the one who told me about the guy. And I will get that information, and I will pass it to our friend over here, and we'll get that to you. Because he needs help. The last I heard, he was still in, it could be that, I hope he's been released, but and he may have been released by now, but the last I heard, he was still in prison, and if he is still in prison, it'd be awfully nice if you guys could help him.